Warren Morris. Hits a deep drive down the right field line. That ball is gone! LSU wins the College World Series on a home run by Morris.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the 60 Feet 6 Inches LSU Podcast. Thank y'all for joining me. In this episode, I will continue to preview the SEC West, taking a look at the Arkansas Razorbacks and the Texas A&M Aggies. As always, you can find the 60 Feet 6 Inches LSU Pod on Apple, Google, Spotify, and other major audio platforms. If you're viewing this on the 60 Feet 6 Inches YouTube channel, please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. The Twitter account is at 60FT6IN LSU Pod. Make sure to follow, hit that notifications bell. And you don't want to miss out on any of the content we will be dropping next week, where the plan is to have something drop every day leading all the way up to the opening pitch for the 2023 season at Alex Box Stadium. There's going to be a ton of content. I can't wait for y'all to interact and see what we got in store for y'all. If you missed the last episode, I previewed Auburn and Mississippi State, sticking with the SEC West. I predicted a 7th place finish for Auburn, going 12-18 in conference, and I predicted a 4th place finish for the Mississippi State Bulldogs with a 15-15 SEC record. Of course, that episode is linked on their Twitter account, either YouTube or podcast version, and I will do the same thing for this one as well. So let's get into it. First up, take a trip up to Fayetteville to preview the Arkansas Razorbacks. Last year in 2022, Arkansas went 46-21 overall, 18-12 in SEC conference play. That was good for second in the SEC West. They did go 0-2 in the SEC tournament, but it didn't matter because they went to Stillwater and won the Oklahoma State Regional. They then went to Chapel Hill and won the North Carolina Super. And then they went to the College World Series where they went 3-2 with both losses coming to SEC West foe Ole Miss. The Razorbacks finished the 2022 season ranked 3rd and 4th in a couple of different polls. And one thing interesting of note, they have been to the College World Series 3 out of the last 5 years. So an amazing job that Dave Van Horn and his staff have done up there in Fayetteville. When you look at some of the team statistics from last year's team, hitting, they were 12 out of 14 teams and batting average at .276, but they were able to drive in those runs. 5th in slugging, 5th in runs scored, 4th in hits, 4th in RBIs, 2nd in doubles. My point is, they may not have had a great team overall batting average, but when it mattered most, when runners were on base, they had the ability to execute and drive in those runs, rack up RBIs, and eventually rack up a lot of W's. And that's all that matters, really. They got the job done when it counted, when it mattered, and especially in SEC conference play. So to me, you can throw the team BA out the window as long as they're getting job done with regards to scoring runs. Pitching, typically Dave Van Horn teams have a very solid pitching staff, and last year was no different for the Hogs. They were 3rd in team ERA at 4.07, 3rd in opponent's batting average at .233, 3rd in opposition hitters K'd, and they were tied for 1st in saves. So very impressive once again by his staff developing those pitchers. Fielding, 2nd best fielding percentage in the SEC at .982, and they actually turned the most double plays. Now, looking ahead to 2023, what does their schedule look like? First, in terms of non-conference, they do start the year out at the College Baseball Showdown with Mizzou and Vandy. Once again, that's taking place in Arlington, Texas, where the Rangers play. They will face TCU, Texas, and Oklahoma State. Then they have a 3-game set with Louisiana Tech, and then a 2-game set with UNLV. And UNLV last year, I don't know how they looked this year, but I know last year they could absolutely mash. So it'll be interesting seeing those guys take the trip east to Fayetteville. Looking at their SEC schedule for 2023, there's really no lulls in there. Their second series of the year is at LSU. They have tough back-to-back series with at Ole Miss and home versus Tennessee. So I'm sure that place will be rocking. But the last 4 could be very tough. But it really depends on how these teams shake out and what their seasons are looking like at this point at the end of the year. They have A&M, at State, South Carolina, then at Vandy to end the year. So Arkansas really drew the short end of the stick this year, looking at their SEC East games, as they missed out on playing Kentucky and Mizzou, and instead they picked up Tennessee and Vanderbilt. In terms of preseason rankings, the Hogs were ranked 8th by Division I Baseball, 11th by Baseball America. And one of the things I noticed with regards to Division I baseball, they do these kind of every couple of years. They rank the programs around the country on the past 10 or 15 years, and they ranked Vanderbilt first this year for the past 10 or 15 years. But then Arkansas came in ranked number 2. So pretty impressive showing in what they've done up there for Dave Van Horn. When you look at the transfer portal, they had the number 3rd ranked overall class. Now this is including Division I transfers, high school kids, and JUCO players that moved into Fayetteville. Some of their key transfers, they have the number 27th ranked kid and Tavian Hosenberger. Sorry if I messed that up. Tavian Hosenberger from Kansas. He looks to play center field and hit potentially leadoff. He was a 2-time All Big 12 selection for the Jayhawks. They also have the 19th ranked transfer in Creighton outfielder Jared Wagner. He should be an immediate impact player, immediate starter in that outfield. He was an All Big East selection out of Creighton. He hit .343 with 11 home runs and 53 RBIs last year for the Blue Jays. And then they also have shortstop John Bolton, who came in from Austin Peay, and several other JUCO players, including 3 pitchers and a shortstop. Moving on to their hitters. So what were some of their key losses in terms of hitters from 2022 to 2023? They actually lost, get this, 74% of their home run production from last year. They lost 73% of their RBI production. That may be the most that I've seen in doing all of these SEC previews. So they lost an absolute ton when it comes to power and driving in runs. To take it a step further, they only returned 2 starters from last year's College World Series team. Highlighting some of those losses, they lost all 3 outfielders. They lost Chris Lanzilli, who hit .326, which led the team last year. He also had 11 home runs and 40 RBIs. They lost Braden Webb, who hit .288 with 15 bombs and 42 RBIs. And they lost another outfielder in Zach Gregory. Moving on to the infield, they lost their double play combination. And if you remember, they turned more double plays than anybody in the SEC last year. They lost starting shortstop Jalen Battles, who hit .289 with 10 home runs, and his partner in crime, second baseman Robert Moore, who had 8 home runs as well. They also lost their starter behind the plate, catcher Michael Turner. All he did was hit .323 last year with 9 home runs and 53 RBIs. So just a ton of experience, a ton of proven players that they have to replace this year. But they hope to do that in the form of Louisiana native Peyton Stovall. Last year, he was a freshman and played first base. This year, it seems like he's going to move over to second base, and they look for him to have a breakout year, and so do I as well. Last year, Peyton Stovall hit .295, drove in 31 runs with 6 home runs. I believe he's from Houghton. So Stovall moving from first to second. Their plan is to move Brady Slavens, who DH last year, to move him off that DH role and move him to first base. Last year, he had 16 home runs and 58 RBIs for Arkansas, so a ton of pop. I'm sure he's going to look to improve on those numbers as well. They also bring back outfielder, part-time starter, Jace Boroffin. 26 games started. He hit .228. He's looking to start this year in the outfield and make a jump. But then you have those transfers, especially in the outfield. You have the Creighton transfer and Wagner, and then the Kansas transfer and Josenberger. So their outfield looks to be filled out. In terms of third base, part-time starter Kendall Diggs looks like he's leading that competition. And he only hit .197 in 27 games last year, but he was hampered by injury. So it looks like they have first base and second base locked up. The biggest question for the Hogs is who's going to play short. That seems like that's a battle between the Austin Peay transfer and a JUCO player. And then who's going to play third? Kendall Diggs may or may not have that spot locked up. You just have to wait and see. But also, you have to replace Michael Turner, who caught last year for them. So they have some serious questions on the infield. When you look at their pitchers, they lost a lot, but man, they are still loaded down there in Fayetteville. Their key losses, they lost their Friday night ace in Connor Nolan. I'm sure the rest of the conference will be happy to see him go. He started 19 games last year, 116 innings pitched with a 3.65 ERA. And then they lost a lot in their bullpen. They lost Evan Taylor, who's actually the older brother of LSU's Grant Taylor. Evan was a lefty. He had 33 appearances last year, 5-0 with a 3.65 ERA, and he could run it up there 94 to 96. They lost kind of their setup man in Zeb Vermillion, Big Zeb. 24 appearances with a 2.39 ERA and 2 saves. And they also lost Cole Ramage, who had 31 appearances. So a ton of appearances from that arm as well, with 50 innings pitched and 3 saves. So who do they return? Why are people so high on Arkansas? If they lost a lot in terms of home runs and RBIs, why are they ranked so high? Well, it's because they have a ton of arms coming back. In fact, I read an article where Dave Van Horn said he believes this is the best staff he has ever had at this point. And that article was written about 2 to 3 weeks ago. So to me, that's saying a lot. You know, coach speak, and they're always going to pump up their players, but for him to come out and say the best staff ever, that's pretty impressive right there. Those are big words coming from the head coach at Arkansas. They lost their Friday night starter in Connor Nolan, but they returned Saturday and Sunday. Their Saturday starter last year was freshman left-handed pitcher Hagen Smith, so now he's a sophomore. I would imagine he's just going to bump right up into that Friday role, and he was dominant last year, especially against LSU. He started 15 games for the Hogs last year, 7-2 record with a 4.66 ERA, 77 innings pitched and 90 Ks, once again, greater than that 1-to-1 ratio we look at here at 60 feet 6 inches. So he's absolutely dominant, and I'm sure he looks to improve on that performance heading into his sophomore year. They also returned Sunday starter from last year, right-handed pitcher Jackson Wiggins, 15 games started, 6-3 record with 66 innings pitched and 82 Ks. So once again, dominant stuff from Wiggins. I just remember he had a really, really dominant fastball as well. One guy a lot of people are very excited about, and the coaching staff is very, very excited about, is right-handed pitcher Will McIntyre. He looks to slot in behind Hagen Smith and Jackson Wiggins into that weekend rotation. He started 8 games for the Hogs last year with a 2.59 ERA and 48 innings pitched. They said he's really kind of that 92, 93 miles an hour, but he's got 3 to 4 pitches for striking. He absolutely pounds the zone and challenges hitter. So I know they're very excited about Will McIntyre in Fayetteville this year. In terms of their bullpen, we mentioned how they lost Taylor and Big Zeb and Cole Ramage, but that's okay because they got their closer back in sophomore Brady Tygart. 8 saves, 24 appearances, 37 innings pitched with 51 Ks. And they also bring back left-handed pitcher out of the pen, Zach Morris. He had 22 appearances and phenomenal numbers. He went 6-1 with a 2.32 ERA out the pen. So right there, you basically have your 3 weekend guys penciled in with Smith, Wiggins, and McIntyre. And then it looks like you might have your setup and your closer guy already ready to roll with left-handed pitcher Zach Morris doing the setting up for sophomore stud closer Brady Tygart. So that's why so many people are excited in Fayetteville. That's why they have the high rankings. So looking at the 2023 prediction for Arkansas, defensively, I just wonder what they're going to look like. With only 2 starting position players back from the 2022 College World Series team, I think the infield is not a mess, but it has some issues, right? You don't know who's going to start at third. You don't know who's going to start at short. And then catcher, obviously, is a problem as well. Also, there's going to be a new double play combination with Stovall moving from first to second. But it seems like second was his natural position, and he just played first last year so they could get his bat into the lineup. As far as the outfield, I don't have nearly as many concerns with those 2 stud transfers coming in, and Wagner and Josenberger from Kansas. And then it also looks like Jace Brohoffen will slide right in there as well, who was a part-time starter for Arkansas in 2022. So hitting-wise, I think they're going to have some pop, and they're going to have some experience when you look at Stovall, Slavens, and Wagner. But besides those guys, I'm just not sure on the quality of the lineup in terms of SEC standards. It's great if you have 3 or 4 guys, but what does everybody else look like around them? And are they able to get on base so those 3 guys can drive them in? Which is, if you remember from the top of the show, that's the best thing Arkansas did last year, was drive in runs with men on base. But when it comes to the arms and the pitching staff, I really think it's one of the best in the conference. I think you can line up their weekend rotation, set up and closer with anyone in the conference. It may not be as good as Tennessee's, but I think when you look at the rest of the conference, they can stack it right up there with anybody. I think you can expect big things from guys like Hagen Smith and Tygart this year coming into their sophomore years after having such success as freshmen last year. So I think they're going to lean heavily on their pitching staff early in the year until conference play comes around. And then Van Horn's going to have a pretty good idea of what those hitters look like and how those position battles shook out. But do they have the elite players from a hitting standpoint to protect the top 4? I don't know. Can they drive in those runs like they did last year? I don't know. Probably. And by the time they get their conference play, they're going to know that. Will they do it with the efficiency and the raw numbers that they put up last year? I just don't think so. But I think they're going to be good enough and lean on those arms out there in that staff in Fayetteville. Therefore, my 2023 prediction for the Arkansas Razorbacks, I predict them to go 17-13 in SEC conference play and to finish second in the SEC West. Moving on south down the road to College Station, everybody's favorite cult-like fan base, the Texas A&M Aggies. I had to throw that in there. Last year, A&M, they went 44-20. They finished first in the SEC West with a 19-11 record. They won their own regional. Then they beat Louisville when they came to College Station for the Supers. They went to the College World Series, which it feels like everybody in the SEC West did, and they went 2-2 in Omaha last year, which is pretty impressive considering Jim Schlossnagle, that was his first year. That was pitching coach Nate Yeske's first year. And obviously they took third base and recruiting coordinator Nolan Kane from LSU over to College Station. When you look at some of their team statistics for 2022, in terms of hitting, they were second in team batting average at 289, seventh in slugging, fourth in runs. A lot of hits coming in second, a lot of doubles. They hit seven. They came in seventh in terms of home runs. They walked a lot, and they struck out a lot. So bottom line, what that tells me is they were very aggressive at the plate with some pop, and they looked to get after you on the bases as well because they stole the third most bases in the SEC last year. So lots of hits, lots of doubles, lots of stolen bases, and we don't walk a lot and you strike out a lot. Well, to me, that just means when they get on base and they see something coming across that plate, they were absolutely hacking, and they were very effective at it last year. Their pitching statistics for 2022, now these kind of shocked me knowing the history of Nate Yeske and what he's done at previous stops at Arizona and Oregon State. They were not very good on the mound in 2022. They were ninth in team ERA at 4.67, 11th in opposing batting average. They gave up the most hits in the SEC, which was more than 22 than the 13th ranked team. They gave up a ton of doubles. They were tied for the most home runs given up as well. That was just not something I would expect from a Yeske staff, but maybe it's due to the fact that, that was year one and they did as much as they can with whoever's on campus and whatever portal guys they could, kind of gather together. In terms of fielding, they were second to last in the conference when we looked at fielding percentage. And actually, they were only better than LSU. And we know how bad LSU was last year when it came to fielding. So they actually committed the same number of errors as LSU as well. Looking ahead to the Aggies' 2023 schedule, first in terms of non-conference, they play in the Shriners Classic in Houston at Minute Maid, so where the Astros play. They will have a rematch versus Louisville, so a rematch versus that Super Regional from 2022. They will also face Rice and Texas Tech in the Shriners Classic. Really nothing else of note in terms of their non-conference. It's pretty weak, to be honest with you. Their SEC schedule, I tell you what, you better strap it on if you're an Aggie player because they are coming out the gate swinging. LSU plays a visit to College Station the first SEC weekend of the year. Then they go to Tennessee, and then when they return home, they have Ole Miss coming to town. So right off the bat, you have LSU, Tennessee, and Ole Miss. By some polls, that's 3 top 10 teams. Ole Miss, their rankings kind of vary a little bit, but you get the picture. Nonetheless, that front half of the schedule is absolutely loaded. They do have Arkansas and Florida back-to-back and kind of the back half of the schedule, but besides that, it's nothing amazing, no crazy stretches like we've seen with Ole Miss so far. They actually miss out on Vanderbilt, South Carolina, and Georgia from the East, so they catch a huge break in terms of those 3 teams, with 2 of those 3 in Vandy and South Carolina being ranked in all of the top 25 polls to lead off the year. When you look at their transfer portal, who did they grab this year? They grabbed the number 45 ranked transfer, Arizona State shortstop Hunter Haas. They grabbed the number 25 ranked transfer, left-handed pitcher from Purdue, sophomore Troy Wansing. And then they grabbed the number 69 ranked transfer. They went out west to USC to get grad transfer right-handed pitcher Carson Lambert. Looking ahead to their hitters, so who do they lose on that 2022 team, and who do they have coming back for 2023? The biggest loss you'll see in their lineup is Dylan Rock. He hit .320 last year with 18 bombs and 64 RBIs. The home runs and the RBIs led the team last year. They also lost Troy Claunch. He hit 292 with 15 doubles. And they had Cole Kaler, who started 63 games last year, but did not hit for a very good average. So right there, 3 starters gone, but specifically a lot of pop with Rock and Clunch. But in terms of their returners and hitters, this is one of the best hitting lineups on paper that is returning in the SEC. Hands down. There's really no denying it. And they have the potential to hit a lot of home runs this year. Returning-wise, they returned, let's start on the infield. First baseman Jack Moss, he led the team last year with a 381 average. He also contributed 49 RBIs. DH utility infielder is back in Austin Boast. He hit 361 with 10 bombs and 45 RBIs. Also, they returned second baseman Ryan Targak. He hit 295 with 15 home runs and 58 RBIs. I don't know if you're paying attention. Maybe I'm going through it too quick. Boast with 10 home runs. Targak with 15 home runs. Moss, the first baseman, hit 381 last year. They also returned part-time starting third baseman, who will be the full-time starting third baseman this year, Trevor Werner. He hit 264 with 7 home runs. He was hampered by injury as well. So when you look at their infield, first base, lockdown. Second base, lockdown. Third base, lockdown. And then Austin Boast, who's DH utility guy, I would imagine he'll probably spend most of his time at DH. That position is locked down as well. Catcher, that's going to be an issue, and that's still an ongoing battle right now in camp. When you look at the outfield, they do return Brett Minich, who hit 307, 7 home runs, 51 RBIs, full-time starter last year. And they also returned Jordan Thompson, who hit 265 and 6 home runs. So right there, you got 2 starters back, ready to roll. So as you can see, that's why I'm so high on this lineup right there. One of the things I did fail to mention, another reason why I'm high for the Aggies, they're actually returning 61% of their home runs and returning 60% of their RBI production from 2022. So a completely different situation in College Station compared to Fayetteville, where those guys were losing 70% of home runs and RBIs. The Aggies are returning 60% out of both those categories. So very impressive so far for A&M. When you look at their pitchers, they're losing their main starter, Micah Dallas. He was a weekend guy for them. 16 games started, 81 innings pitched, 7-3 record. They also lost 2 guys in the bullpen, and really their main guys out the bullpen in terms of appearances and effectiveness. They lost left-handed pitcher Jacob Palich, 28 appearances, 6-3 record with a 2.47 ERA and 5 saves. So he really just did everything for those guys in the pen. And they also lost Joseph Menifee, who also had 28 appearances. So between him and Palich, they were on the team lead with 28 appearances out the pen. Menifee, 6-2, 53 innings pitched with 87 Ks. So very impressive ratio right there. When I did the calculations, they only lost 38% of their games started last year, which was mainly from Micah Dallas, who started 16 games. So who are the Aggies bringing back when you look at their arms? So 2 key weekend pieces for this year's team will be right-handed pitcher Nathan Detmer. So he started 19 games last year. So weekend guy, boom, he just slots right in. Last year in 2022, 6-3 record with a 4.99 ERA, 92 innings pitched. So he got a lot of work out of that arm last year. And in reading up for this preview, Detmer can run it up there at 98, 99, but they think he's going to pitch really kind of in the mid-90s, which is where he's more effective. They also had a guy who was set to be a key piece of their weekend rotation, but it turns out he had Tommy John surgery in the fall. That's left-handed pitcher Ryan Prager. He started 15 games for the Aggies last year, but unfortunately he's going to miss the 2022 season. So they're hoping right-handed pitcher Chris Cortez will slot into that weekend spot. In 2022, he had 25 appearances, a 6-3 record with a 4.91 ERA. Once again, another big arm, big velocity numbers from Cortez. He can run it up to 98, 99 as well. And I think they're really going to rely on, all reports point to, left-handed pitcher transfer from Purdue. Last year he was a great freshman, part of that Big Ten all-freshman team. This year he's a sophomore in College Station. That is left-handed pitcher Troy Wansing. In the reports that I read, he can run it up to 94, 95 from the left-hand side, and he has 2 quality secondary pitches and a slider and a changeup. So look for him to fill that void left by Prager, who had Tommy John. So I would imagine A&M's weekend rotation is going to look something like Detmer, maybe Friday. Then you slot into Purdue transfer Wansing, Wansing. So it's kind of getting me right there. I want to say Wansing. Wansing on Saturday. And then the right-handed pitcher, Chris Cortez, who they're hoping is going to take a big leap forward this year as your Sunday starter. The big thing, though, is what's going to happen in the pen. They do bring back Brad Rudis, who had 26 appearances, but really they're going to rely on JUCO guys and transfers, notably USC right-handed pitcher, the grad transfer, Carson Lambert, to fill out a role. But in doing some research, there were just a bunch of names thrown out there, and it seems like Schlossnagle and Yeski are really going to have to find some guys they can trust before conference play starts. As we mentioned, LSU, Tennessee, Ole Miss coming straight to town there. They're going to have to figure things out quick in their non-conference to see who they trust on the back end of that staff. And with regards to middle relief setup and who's going to close for them, I don't know. And in all the articles I read, there was no one person that kept being mentioned in terms of who has locked down that closer spot. So moving on to my 2023 prediction, I like their lineup a lot. I mentioned that, a lot of returners, a lot of pop, guys hit for a high average, and, just a lot of production as a whole returning for the Aggies. I believe they have the bats to get back to Omaha. There is no doubt, but do they have the arms? Reading up on some articles, Schlossnagle feels that their staff, the ceiling is higher this year for their staff than last year. He feels they're more talented and deeper, but he does feel like some guys are going to have to step up, mainly with how effective their secondary pitch is. He knows, and he stated it in these articles, that they will have to have effective secondary pitches to get through these lineups multiple times when it comes to SEC conference play. He really needs these guys to make strides with regards to Detmer and Cortez. That's great. They can run it up to 97, 98. That's always amazing. But if you don't have a breaking ball or something else for a strike, eventually these SEC bats are going to catch up to you second, third time through the order. Another thing I noticed with regards to their pitchers, these guys are huge physically. All of them seem like they were anywhere from 6'3" to 6'7", anywhere from 215 to 240. So really big guys, and it seems like a lot of them have some really big arms. But how does that translate into SEC play in terms of a lack of experience or having success at lower levels? How does that play when you're facing SEC lineups like Arkansas's or LSU's or Ole Miss's, Tennessee's? The list goes on. And those guys aren't just great 3 and 4 hole. They're great 1 through 7. When you look at their schedule, the first 3 weekends do worry me a little bit with LSU, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. And if you're the Aggies, and maybe their fans feel differently, but me, I'm trying to be objective here. Do they get 5 games out of those 9 games? So between LSU, Tennessee, and Ole Miss, do you think they can get 5? I don't think so. I think the number's probably 4. So where do I project the Aggies? I think they will go 16-14 in SEC conference play, and I predict them to finish 3rd in the SEC West this year. Thank you all for tuning in. As a reminder, like, subscribe, comment to the YouTube channel. Follow me on Twitter. The account is at 60FT, 6IN, LSU Pod. As always, Apple, Google, Spotify, other major audio platforms is where you can catch the pod. On deck, Tennessee and LSU. Massive combo pod. I was going to try to do them separate, but I said, you know what? Forget it. I'm just going to throw them all together. Look for that early next week. Also, hit the notifications bell for Twitter. Big things planned for y'all next week leading up to LSU's opening series for the 2023 season at Alex Box Stadium. So until next time, y'all stay safe. And as always, go Tigers.